Hi, everybody. We're going to start looking at the real big introduction to the Cold War. First time we're really looking post World War II. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a little introduction, discussion, question, some thinking about this discussion of things that we can start to talk about, such as emergency drills. Now, emergency drills happen all the time in schools, and there's a various number of them. Usually, the big three that a lot of people have is they'll have a fire drill. Obviously, when a fire goes off, a shelter in place drill where it may not be a massive issue, but they just want students to stay in the hallway. There's something messy that may need to be cleaned up, or maybe there's something happening outside the school. They don't want them to walk through campus. And then there's a lockdown drill, which is much more severe that we'll talk about. But really, all of these type of drills have a purpose. If there is an event that's going on that could be a problem, we need to find a way to remedy that. We need to have a plan in case something like that happens, right? Think about a fire drill. So a fire drill, right, at school happens. They pull the alarm, right? That really loud buzzer goes off and you can barely hear and you walk out. Now, not what actually happens, but what you're supposed to do is supposed to leave everything that you're at. You're supposed to go after they clear the room, lock the door. Everybody should walk out the building, not be running and pushing. People shouldn't be talking, and there's various reasons why. Now, some students usually get annoyed by this, but if somebody trips and falls in the stairwell, that slows up time, that backs up things even more. If people pushing through doors, it's less efficient, right? And then even the talking thing, that it's really hard if somebody is in need of help, if there's danger and it's already loud with this siren, but if people are talking like crazy, it really carries and echoes. If somebody's in need of help, you can't get. There's all these processes what to do in order to keep you safe, to make sure that if crisis does happen, what to do. Now, you hope this never happens. You may have been doing fire drills for your entire life at school, but you've never had a fire incident at school. Thank God. But if there was an incident, you should be ready. Things that I had growing up in the Midwest, I had tornado drills, which was not really anything that you would really have to deal with unless you live or you grew up somewhere in Tornado Alley. Now I'm at the top end of it, but we still had to do it every Thursday at about 1 o'clock. A tornado siren would go off. It's this really loud, whining sound. What we would have to do is we'd have to get away from any sort of door that would have glass in it and get anything that could fall on us. And we'd have to kind of put our head between our knees and our hands interlocked behind our neck and nuzzle up to the wall. And we would have to do this to really prep in case a tornado hit, right? Got to make sure you know what to do, especially if you're in elementary school, even middle, even high school, had to do these things that you're ready for. Or today, something that we have to deal with, like active shooter drills. Really, really scary. It's not something that we want to have experience ever by any means, but we need to be prepared in case something does happen. There's a process to make sure that these things do not get out of hand, that we can mitigate as much damage, that we can protect ourselves, that we can be orderly, we can be efficient, so that everybody stays safe as much as possible. Now, a lot of these things, I'm going to make sense why we're talking about this as we bridge into our topic today, and here we go. So, at the end of World War II, the United States and Japan are still having this issue. Germany's already been defeated. We use the massive D-Day invasion. But America does something for the first time and the last time to date this has ever happened. Is we use a weapon that has never ever been since seen in human history used on other people. There's many that exist and people have tested them on sites, but never on other people in the means of war or any context like that. But the use of the atomic bomb, this sort of paranoia is going to ripple through the rest of the world as time goes on. And the biggest reason is at the time that they're used, America is the only country with nuclear capabilities. However, this will drastically change in a very short period of time. We are going to see a lot of different emergency safety drills that happen now. The same thing is going to happen then, and this is going to be one prevailing fear or feature post World War II. It's kind of what I described the Jurassic Park scenario. If you've ever seen a Jurassic Park movie, you have a bunch of people that open up a park where there are live dinosaurs that they've brought back to life. Just because you can go into a park where people have made dinosaurs come back to life doesn't mean you should. People get hurt, people die. Now we have this nuclear capability. Just because we have the capability, should we continue to use it? Other people around the world start building it up. There's a lot of conflict that we need to be prepared in case someone else develops this capability. What if they point at the United States? Are we going to be able to stop it? If we can't stop it, worst case scenario, how do we protect ourselves? And the number one way we're going to do that is with a brand new safety drill that's introduced, something called duck and cover. Students all across the nation are going to be encouraged to do this. It's going to start at the very, very end of the 1940s, maybe like 1949, but really in the 1950s is what it's known for. But we're going to be practicing this. This is going to be something that's going to happen in our classes often, and we're going to practice what happens. It's a very simple process. Now, this diagram gives you a third step for those of you that are very complex. But the first step you do is you duck. You get on the floor because you cannot move through solid objects. If you can, I'd be very impressed. I would love to see that. Step two, after you duck, then you must cover. Cover yourself underneath your desk to protect you in case this nuclear bomb goes off. Now, some of you may be wondering, Mr. Mack, that's pretty dumb. If there's a nuclear bomb that goes off, right, isn't it ever going to be vaporized? Yeah, pretty much if you're close enough. But the idea is that even if there is some issue wrong, even if it is a flawed drill, it's something to protect people. If there's a bomb that's dropped, right, in a general area or farther out, there's still ripple effects, pressure waves that send all the way out, further out until it disbands. But it can hit buildings, things can fall. The way of kind of providing protection. Now you think about, where do we learn these drills at the very, very beginning? A lot of the earliest places we learn these drills are in elementary school or middle school, and then by high school we become a little bit jaded. I know what to do. This is a little ridiculous, blah blah blah, that whole thing. But it's a really good process to start ingraining at a young age, and this becomes a normal part of their culture, just like active shooter drills are a really normal part of our culture right now. Prepping if something like that would happen to make sure that people are safe, orderly, and taken care of. So what's going to happen is they're going to let off this huge siren in case a bomb does go off, to give people some sort of anticipation about what to do, that something's coming, and it's going to sound a little bit crazy. But if you hear it, it's going to be something very, very loud. And now you can duck and cover whenever, but you need to know when this bomb is going off. So what they're going to do is they're going to let out this huge siren, and this siren is going to be a very, very common sound. Now, I'm going to play it for you just a second, so you're going to get a taste of really how loud this thing is. So just prepare yourself. If you don't have headphones in, it's going to be pretty loud when you talk people around you. And if you do have headphones in, it could be loud. So just prep yourself. So that's what those alarms are going to sound like. They're very extreme. That's kind of like, it sounds a little bit similar to like The Purge. If you ever seen any of those movies. But what you're going to do is you can take a break right now, and a great, great video to watch. If you just type into YouTube here and you just type in duck and cover, you're going to find about a 9 to 10 minute video. And it's going to be what you would probably describe as cringeworthy. But the big thing here is it's supposed to be serious. This is an actual film that's produced by the federal government. That's a civil defense film in order to teach children what to do in the case of these explosions. Now, we can talk about this in a lot of different ways about what 1950s culture is like and what 1950s schools are like. But one of the biggest pieces to really embrace is this is a huge part of post World War II culture. What is it really, really like? So take a minute. You can watch that video. If not, we're going to keep cruising on with some of these discussions as well. All right, so this is going to be the beginning of a topic known as the Cold War. The Cold War is very misunderstood, but I think it's very interesting, impactful. It's really kind of unlocks a lot of modern contemporary issues. This is going to be an issue that's really going to dominate everything in society for probably the next 45 years at least, right? So we get up to the 1990s. I know, really old era when I was born. But we will be getting into this topic a little bit more. So first thing we have to figure out is, what is this Cold War? So when we hear the word war, the first thing we think of usually is guns, bombs, bullets, grenades, all that stuff. And it's not exactly that. The Cold War is more of an era than a war, but we're going to talk about where this term really comes from. It happens from about 1945 to about 1990. 1945 is the end of World War II. So some historians say with the dropping of the atomic bomb, the Second World War ended and the Cold War began. Right? We're going to go into really the collapse of the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist today, and really where that leaves us. How do we get to that throughout time? Now, the other big question we have is why Cold War? What does that mean? Is it because it's fought in a really cold place? Is it because we're fighting Russia or the Soviet Union and they're in a really cold country? No, none of that. The big reason it's not really like a normal war or maybe a hot war. This is a little bit of a colder war, meaning it hasn't really heated up into real conflict or fighting. We're going to have proxy wars or what they sometimes call puppet wars, which means that we'll support, say, one side in a conflict and the Soviet Union will support another. And so we won't fight each other directly. We'll fight each other through other people. An example of this would be we will support the South Korean government and the Soviets will support the North Korean government, or North versus South Vietnam, or East versus West Berlin, or East versus West Germany, in a lot of conflict, whether it's actual fighting or more political economic conflicts. There will be other wars inside of this. The most famous one will probably be the Vietnam War, which we will definitely talk about in the future in greater depth. But this really helps us start to unlock that story a little bit more. Now, the next part we have to talk about is this difference between the two. And a great way to take notes on this subject is to make just a little T chart, right? You make the shape of the letter T. On one side, you have the US, one side, you have the Soviet Union. And we'll be able to compare these two and really start to unlock a little bit more depth in their subject. The first thing we have to talk about is differing political ideologies, different political ideas. The United States, we pride ourselves and we're really deep rooted in the concept of democracy, and that's changed. There's contradictions in U.S. history for sure, but democracy in essence is where the people have a say in our voting process. The people get to vote. In our country, we have an indirect democracy where instead of us voting on every single issue in the United States and every single law, what we decided to do instead was we elected people who vote on our behalf. We are senators, our representatives, whether it's the state or federal level, or any other form of office. In the United States, we really do have competing political parties to give people what we describe as choice. There's really two major political parties in the United States. Although there are other political parties or subdivisions of them, there's really only two main ones, the Democrats and the Republicans. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, it's not really a political party type country because once the Soviet regime takes over, and especially when Stalin takes over, there's not really any opposing political parties. You're either for the country or you're not. The only political party is if you're for the Soviet Union. And there is one unified leader in that movement who tried to eliminate any divisions, any subdividing amongst the people. In the United States, we really push this idea of freedom, but that idea of freedom doesn't always mean unity. So we can have vastly different ideas about what it means for politics, economics, social aspects in our country, religious aspects in our country. We have so many different religious groups, and so there is division in that sense, but we really push this idea of it's the freedom to choose, not necessarily unity in the sense of what you are choosing. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union does not have religious freedom because they believe that in religions they are inherently unequal. It creates divisions amongst people. For example, when you look at the Roman Catholic Church, there are differences in right. There's priests and there are deacons slightly below them, and then there are bishops and archbishops and cardinals, and all the way at the very top is the Pope. There's this level of inequality throughout of different levels of access to membership, if you will, or roles in the church, and they're really trying to do away with that. The only loyalty you should have is not other things besides the country. The country, we should be unified to our one country. And lastly, when we talk about economics, the United States is heavily supportive of, proud and defensive of capitalism. The idea that I can have an idea, that I can make money off it because it's my unique idea, that I should be able to monetize off of it. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union has an economy controlled by the government. So in the United States, you can pick whatever you want to do, and if people buy your product, you make money. That's how you kind of exist in our market. If people stop buying your product, you have to adapt, change, or hope that people start buying it, or else you run out of money and you go out of business. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, everybody is given a job. It's not about you. It's not about the individual being successful. It's about the country being successful. So, for example, say, I don't know, little Johnny, we'll say little Johnny, is controlling, right, he has control of a small farm. That's his own family farm, been for generations under the Soviet Union. He wouldn't necessarily own that farm. The government would. He would grow crops for the government, and the government would distribute it to people based on their need, not based on necessarily what they earn necessarily themselves, to take care of everyone so that everyone is on an equal level. Everybody in the community, which you can see in the word communism, is on an equal level playing field. It really helps. Communism and socialism really helps for those people that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic status. Say you own a bakery, when you're baking this bread and producing this food, the government will ultimately organize and run it, and they will determine what you do with this product. You don't per se own that business or that farm or that land. It's really more so controlled by the government. They're going to regulate what you need to make and what you do. They're just going to tell you what you need to do. And so that's a sharp difference, right, about what's going on here. And we'll continue to look at this as we go a little bit deeper into the story. Uh-oh, bomb siren went off. Maybe you need to practice your duck and cover drills right now, right? The Cold War tensions have begun. Now, enough of that. We're going to go right back into our World War II topics. We're going to do just a little bit of review. We looked at a lot of post-war conferences, and we tried to set up a world in which no conflict would exist for the future to try to make it a better world. So we're going to see how will we actually do that. If you go back to the Yalta conference, and the way that I kind of may have helped you remember in the past is Y. It's just the first letter in Yalta, right? Y is almost at the end of the alphabet. So they figure this out almost at the end of the war of what they're going to do when they reach the end. You're almost to Z, right? We're almost there. So what are we going to do right when we reach that end? We talked about other various post-war issues, the biggest ones being the United Nations and self-determination for Eastern Europe, granting these countries this freedom, but that's not necessarily going to happen. That promise will not be fulfilled. The United Nations will be created for sure, an attempt to create peace for the future to settle any international disputes. Now, there was also another conference we talked about that came after, is the Potsdam Conference. Damn, we decided to drop the atomic bomb. It's going to open up a lot of various other little issues there. But there was something else that's said at the Potsdam Conference that if we talked about World War II, we may not have hit on. And this is something that it only becomes relevant now. Really, what they decided to do is, what are they going to do with this giant country, Nazi Germany, that wreaked all this havoc in their mind? And how are we going to handle this country? We tried doing it before, of keeping it intact, of stripping away its colonies and its land, and look how quickly they came back to power in less than 10, 15 years, really. And so really what they decided to do is they decided to divide this country up, make it a shell of what it once was. Germany cannot exist. We had two world wars back to back, and both times, right, they tried to invade what was Russia, the Soviet Union, and there was a lot of death, and Germany really gets blamed for both world wars. Ultimately, what they're going to do is they're going to divide this country. They're going to divide it between the East and the West. The East you can see represented by the red here, and I'm just going to take this little marker, ignore my shaky hand, it's not really working too well. Everything over here, right, is going to be East Germany, and everything west of that in the green for the UK, the blue for France, the orange for the United States is going to be West Germany. These are two separate countries, separate governments. Germany no longer exists. Meanwhile, in East Germany, controlled by the Soviet Union, up here, we see this little squiggle, is controlled by the Soviet Union, is going to implement its philosophies of communism. And West Germany, controlled by the Allied forces, if you notice that, that's right here. We have the remaining Allied forces. We have Great Britain, we have France, we have the United States of America, are going to use their system of government of democracy and capitalism in West Germany. Now, the stupid way that I remember them, right, is West is best because they rhyme and East is least. It's stupid. It doesn't really make sense. It's not catchy in any way, shape, or form, but it rhymes, and those stupid things help me remember all of that information. The only other thing we have to really talk about here now, and if you notice, right, there's something else going on here. Inside of East Germany, there's this really weird blob of more colors, and if you notice, it looks like the rest of the country as a whole. So what the heck is going on here? That right there would be the capital of Germany. The capital of Germany, we'll have our Dora the Explorer moment is. Anybody know what the capital of Germany is? Wow, I hope you got it. It's Berlin. You ever heard of the city of Berlin? If you didn't, don't feel too bad. Small potatoes, not really a big deal. But that is going to be divided as well. So the major city inside of East Germany is going to be divided into four sections as well, East versus West. It's going to make for some really, really complicated issues. We're going to revisit this later in the week, but this is something you may want to start thinking about. All right, so now this leads us into more of the topic of the Cold War, a little bit more in depth. Now, the Cold War is going to be a very broad, sweeping term for an era, a long era over 40 years, usually about 45 years, what most historians mark it at. But really, the first thing we have to do before we get into any form of conflict is, for example, on the last page, we looked at some of the geographical or political concerns. Now we have to talk about why are they fighting? What are the root ideas that we're fighting about? One of them is the goals for the United States, really what our goal might be. Our goal is really going to be surrounded as reconstructing, rebuilding Europe to avoid, hopefully, another world war. We're hoping to expand the idea of free elections all across Eastern Europe and really fortify this idea of military superiority. We believe that we need a strong military in order to push for these free elections, in order to ensure that these things happen, to ensure that an evil force doesn't rise again. And our number one goal throughout this entire period is going to be about fending off communism and spreading democracy. And so we're going to see this in a lot of different ways. We're going to see this in the political, military, social realm, economic realm. But we're also going to see this even in the individual level. We saw a lot of propaganda in World War II. Propaganda against communism and against the Soviets are not going to go away. It's something very, very prevalent. It's going to be something very normal from here on out. And so one great little tool that you can look at is you can look at propaganda posters like this. That one on the left, is this tomorrow? When America under communism looks like there's fighting, there's fire, there's people being assaulted, the whole country's going to ruin. Or the one on the right, kind of a little shout out to the Titanic, the giant red iceberg that America is heading right for. It's going to sink us if we don't fight back, if we don't steer to a different course. There's another really great resource that you can watch if you want to. It's called Make Mine Freedom. It's a very cheesy um, end of 1940s, early 1950s era, I believe, propaganda little commercial. And I'll leave a link to that right down below in the video description if you want to check that out. So it's real quick, but it gets you a good idea about what is America concerned about? What are these evils? How do we depict it? It'd be very similar to maybe some of those Disney cartoons of World War II. So the one last thing we're really going to look at is where does America push from here? Our president after World War II or as World War II ends is going to be by the name of a guy by the name of Harry Truman. Remember, FDR dies not long after taking office after winning his fourth election. And so Harry Truman is the guy that's really going to see the end of the war with Nazi Germany, and he's going to be the one who's going to get the decision to drop the atomic bomb. So he's going to lead us to the end of World War II. And where are we going to go immediately after? He's going to serve until 1952. So he's going to win an election of his own, and so he's going to be in office for a considerable time. Now, 1947, about 2 years after the war, America is really going to go out and they're going to make a public declaration, sometimes called the Truman Doctrine because he gives this speech and he's the president this time. But the general sentiment is that the United States government is actively vocal about, as it says here in the yellow, promise to provide political, military and economic aid to, and this is very important, democratic nations resisting the spread of communism. We will provide any means of help and aid to any democratic country trying to fight communism. If you're fighting communism, we're going to be there. Doesn't really matter where you are in the world. America will have your back. It's this big kind of denunciation of communism. And this is a huge change. If you go all the way back to maybe like your US 1 class of George Washington, this idea of staying neutral on affairs, that's like in a trash can lit on fire. Like that is a long way gone after World War II, and we are getting nowhere close to that anymore. We're only moving further and further away. We are pledging to provide all forms of support anywhere, even militarily, right? That means we're willing to fight places, not just send them money, not just pledge allegiance to these other countries or have an alliance. We're willing to use our military to do so. And we're going to see this in our first major policy, and where we're really going to stop today. We'll pick that up in another video. But America adopting a policy of containment. We're trying to stop communism from expand. So think about it like a container that you bring for lunch, like Tupperware. If you want to bring soup for lunch, your mom doesn't just open up your soup, right? Open up the soup can and pour it directly into your lunchbox. It's weird, gross, and a lot of other health concerns. But right, we want to keep it where it is. It's okay where it is as long as it doesn't expand. Eventually, it'll get taken care of. But it can get real messy if that thing opens up. If that soup is just sitting there in your bag, it's so many questions I have for you. Really, what containment means is actively stopping the spread of communism. We're trying to contain it where it is, keep it where it is. We're going to see examples of this in the future. How is America going to try to handle this? All questions we're going to be answering throughout the year, throughout other video installments. If you have any questions, drop a comment down below or reach out to me directly, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Take care.